Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our third night of the 2021 MFA Thesis Reading Series, where I have the honor of introducing our first reader of the evening, Joe Dunn. Joe is originally from Elmhurst, Illinois. He attended Indiana University, where he received a BA in English Literature with minors in History and Philosophy. Currently, he is a short fiction writer and instructor here at UNCG. Though varied in scope, his stories tend to focus on addiction, technology, labor, and family crises. I have had the privilege of reading these stories, of talking about them in workshop, and more importantly, hearing Joe talk about them. The passion he has for writing and storytelling cannot be conveyed through mere credentials, so let me tell you about it. I have spent many, many hours with Joe discussing the books we've been reading, and the story ideas developing in our heads. Our taste in fiction is quite similar. The fiction we read, anyway. We both love stories that bend genres, that incorporate speculative and fantastical elements. We began exchanging favorite books and series with each other, sending stories that reminded us of each other's interests. These genre-bending elements started to emerge in the fiction that Joe writes. He seems to have a particular interest in exploring technology and the impact it has on humanity. Stories like a man secretly drawn to a dating app as an escape from a relationship he is unhappy with, or employees of a waste management union being replaced by self-driving auto trucks, and, one of my favorites, a man who becomes obsessed with a couple via their internet live stream. We are thrust into the worlds that these characters occupy as their lives are upended, their addictions revealed, and the choices they make to regain some control. Joe's stories are complex, fraught with desire, and complicated relationships with both other humans and the technology we now share a world with. They are grounded in reality with a sense of the what-if, pushing past boundaries into the unknown, and it's that combination of elements that I truly admire in his work. Yes, Joe is passionate about the fiction he creates, but he's also passionate about the fiction he reads, and helping his classmates and cohorts succeed. His comments in workshop are always well articulated and helpful. He isn't afraid to offer suggestions or wild ideas. Ideas that seem wild, anyway, but are so specific, so spot on to the story and characters being discussed, it is obvious he has spent a lot of time going through the pages, putting in the effort to make that story the best version of itself it can possibly be. The feedback and letters I have received from Joe are always so personal, and have made my own fiction infinitely better. Lastly, Joe is beyond generous and selfless. He is always there to hear out ideas for a story I'm working on, or to offer ideas if I'm struggling, and this often takes place over a beer on his front porch. When he reads a story or an article that reminds him of others, he will send it along with the hope that it'll help them with their own work. When we were interested as a cohort in having a first-year reading during our first semester here at UNCG, Joe stepped up to plan it, to make sure we had a truly memorable evening. What I'm getting at here is that Joe is a caring and compassionate person, and an integral member of our community. I am grateful to have gotten the chance to read Joe's work and to watch it grow over time. I am even more grateful to have been a member of the same cohort as him, to have him as a fellow writer, colleague, and above all, a friend. I cannot wait to see what he has in store for us this evening. And now, finally, please join me in welcoming Joe Dunn.
Thank you, Ashley. That was very kind. Going to be hard to follow up, and I'm going to try not to cry. Thank you, though. Secondly, thank you to the man behind the scenes, quite literally, Michael Springer. Your labor to make these virtual readings as magnificent as they are is so very much appreciated. Thank you to Terry and Jesse for the work you do to make this program such an amazing opportunity for writers, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to be part of such an amazing program. Thank you to Stuart Deschelle for making poetry accessible to a fictioneer like myself, and for pointing out that some of my poetry actually was pretty close to being in meter, which for anyone who's seen me dance is quite surprising. Thank you to Derek Palacio for your feedback on the story I'm about to read, for your questions, even the ones, and especially the ones that I cannot answer, and for your willingness to jump right in to the busiest time of the semester. Thank you to Jeanette Alliot for your enthusiasm for difficult characters and strange stories, our conversations about labor, and for pointing out where tension lay latent in my stories. And lastly, thank you for your amazing whiteboard skills in visually breaking down each of my stories. To my thesis chair, Holly Goddard-Jones, thank you for your gentle yet firm feedback on my stories, especially where there are plot points or characters that simply make no sense. Your critical eye and eclectic taste made for tutorials in which I felt I could bring anything, and I have brought some very weird things, and I'm grateful for that. I'm also very grateful for all you've taught me about teaching the craft of writing. Thank you to my fiction cohort, Matt, Courtney, Sophie, Ashley, and Chris, for your dedicated readings of all of my workshop drafts. You all not only saw promise in my weird, genre-bending stories, but actually matched me story for story, and I'm intensely grateful for that. I look forward to following all of your work in the future. To the first-year fiction cohort, thank you for the attention you gave to the earliest draft of this story, and for all of the stories that you've shared with me during our workshop together. Best of luck in year 2. To my 2 sisters, Therese and Maggie, thank you for teaching me to move through this world with grace, compassion, and a kick-ass sense of style. To Ann Dudak, my cousin, who came here to be with me in person tonight, thank you for all the books throughout all of the years, for never treating me like I was too young to read them, and for your truly relentless support of what I do. Last, but of course not least, Mom. Thank you so much for the endless help you've given me and my work. I could spend my entire reading time up here just listing all of the things you've done for me. And those are, of course, just the things that I know about. There isn't the slightest doubt in my mind that you've done so much more for me than I could ever know, and I am eternally grateful for that, and for you only occasionally reminding me that I would make a great lawyer. Okay, so getting into the story here. This is a sci-fi story, and I'm hoping to read all of it through, so not much entry here. We're just going to go into it. The Last Remnant of Sorsel. Entry 1. We're orbiting Sorsel, our new home, when the administrators tell the engineers to wake us all up and then launch the terraforming pods. They want us to watch. We spoke of it often before hibernating. Chemical atmospheric change in a day. Another day of hurricane-force storms wrapping the planet in a gray cocoon. Then life. We may not be the first dead planet colony, but we are the furthest from Earth, Mars, and the Oort cloud colonies. We are bringing life to a dead planet, and that dead planet is giving us life. Our home, which we can see being built beneath us. Our habitation was sent ahead of us, shortly after scout drone surveillance reported back all the characteristics of a dead planet. Lack of water, lack of nitrogen-rich atmosphere, lack of planetary tombstones. Through a small series of autopiloted rockets, the necessary nanomaterial left months ago, programmed to build itself into homes for us upon arrival. Because the nanomaterial was built for the desolation of space, our homes are effectively indestructible on planet, even through landing and terraforming. Our town is already there, neatly arranged in space to give us each our own garden on top of any food we grow collectively. The administrators keep trying to show us news clips, viral videos, or sports games from Earth and Mars, but we find it harder and harder to focus on, to care about, our old home planets. We agree it is the distance, sure, but mostly it is the simple fact that none of us will return. What is there for us? We volunteered for the Dead Planet Project knowing full well that it meant a new life, utterly cut off from the solar system habitats. Each of us had our reasons. These reasons are as varied as we are. The solar system habitats have been pushing the Dead Planet Project for decades to depopulate Earth and Mars. We're the latest bunch of volunteers who offered themselves up to the possibilities of a new world. We've begun to learn about each other, though the administrators and the engineers prefer to stick to themselves. The settlers have gathered each night, some of us sharing stories of how we got here. We all volunteered, but we share where we're from, what we did before, our hopes and dreams for this new planet. Mostly, we imagine the empty space, the openness of it all after each of us spent our lives surrounded by thick apartment complexes. We divide up roles, though we're not supposed to until we reach Sorsel. My Gel had a great-grandfather who composted, so we agreed that they should lead that project. Yillian's father taught him the basics of irrigation when he was a child. We aren't even sure what skills we'll need, but we all feel ready, excited even, for our adventure. Entry 2. Most of us walk around in a kind of stupefied daze. We know that part of it is the newness, the unexpectedness of it all, but as the second sun rises over fields of blue grass, high as your head, all of us stare in wonder. Or when we found a small lake of burnt orange liquid, nearly red. It was shadowy and almost metallic, like mercury. None of us stepped onto the fine-grained sand beach encompassing the lake. None of us would have said we were scared. Mostly we were amazed and excited that our planet held such new wonders. We've been here for 5 days, and our home is beautiful and bountiful. The landed ship marks one end of our town. It stands there solemn and immovable, a testament to our past and a commitment to our future. It will never fly again. From there, the town spreads to the west, following a main road with a dozen or so offshoots. There's an engineering building to the north and an administrative building to the south. At the far east end of town, there stands a community center. Dotted amongst these are dozens of homes, more than we can fill at the moment, each with a small plot of land. Surrounding all of it to the north, south, and east are the fields for tilling. To the west stands the fields of blue grass. We all thought that the terraforming process was meant to hyper-fertilize all the sand into soil, but there was still sand on plant petals, latched onto buildings, found in corners. It was like old Mars sand, reddish and yellow, and we soon grew tired of it in a quiet, resigned sort of way. This is our home, after all, and the engineers tell us that it should dissipate quickly. Tomorrow we say goodbye to the western and southern colonies. They're setting off in cruisers, flying low over the ground, giving us a more accurate map of the planet than the scout drone flyover. It is an exciting prospect, getting the lay of the land, as they used to say. Entry 3. The southern and western colonies left 6 days ago, and we haven't heard anything from either one of them. Because we don't know everything about this planet's interior geology, we expected communication blackouts, or the engineers say they did. The admins say that they aren't worried, but we are, and we suspect that they are. There could be massive organic magnets beneath much of the crust, making communication impossible. They could have damaged the radios. They could have just decided to ignore us. None of us say that there could be something out there, or the storms are rougher than anticipated, or the tech is failing. None of us said we might be alone now. Once a week, we all take our collected sand out a few miles and bury it. It reminds most of us of taking the recycling out in our childhoods, though even some of us are too young for that. We pass the lake of orange mercury on our way, and sometimes we see shadows dancing upon the surface. Even little ripples appear. We stop and stare, unspeaking, captivated. When we asked about fish, admin assured us it was impossible that anything living could be down there. There is nothing living to begin with, and the pods can't produce life on that scale artificially. The lake captivated us, and we worried over it much more than the sand. The sand, so tiny, so ubiquitous, so invasive. We couldn't sweep it up or out fast enough. The engineers thought that it was someone's idea of a joke, most likely, or possibly a problem with how the pods shattered part of the planet's crust upon landing. We found sand plastered to the outsides of buildings to which nothing should stick, forming strange designs of straight lines and violent sudden angles. We found the sand in cupboards, in closets, under our rugs, and even our pillows. We found sand in different places each time, and we grew to talk about it. "Where's the sand today?" became a simple greeting between us. Entry 4. Admin is clearly worried about the southern and the western colonies. We want answers, and we just learned that the engineers have been working on different communications methods, none of them working. We all agreed we should have been told. Admin assure us that they'll have an answer soon, but also that they don't really know anything yet. We ask how both of these can be true, and they talk about procedures outlined in the optional additional orientation materials. And they refuse to look into the ripples appearing on the Orange Lake. We see them often, and it's difficult to believe that it's simply our minds playing tricks or the strange shadows from the two suns. They won't even really consider it. We know that their resources are spent trying to communicate with the other colonies and attempting to locate and understand the microwinds. Microwinds are the engineers' latest theory about the sand. We thought it was our imagination, but it's increasing. After we come back from dumping the sand, it's there again, filling a different corner. It's gotten into our computers and our e-readers. They don't know how it could get into the motherboards, but it does, and that isn't even the worst of it. A row of tomatoes on the furthest edge of the northern field had sand in them. We discovered it on accident. Ethon tripped over a plant. They were still small, inedible little green things, but the trunk of the plant tore. Everything looked healthy, but we found sand ingrained in the vegetable itself, just dotted around the inside. It was in the stalks, too, and the vines, and even the fibers of the leaves. It was just the one row, and we uprooted it and the next healthy row besides in hopes of stopping the spread. Still, we took any healthy food we could find and stored it in the ship. We disinfected it twice, just to be sure. Entry 5. 15 days we've been here, and admin finally got the engineers to inspect the gnat-like things on the burnt orange lake, which we've taken to calling Sunset Lake. We were loud in making a fuss about it, and then we were silent when the engineers announced that the gnat-like things were just sand. Tiny grains of individual sand floating on microwinds. More confirmation of their theory. It should have eased us, but didn't. We no longer trust the sand, and we trust the engineers less and less to tell us what is happening, to even know what is happening. We hadn't trusted the planet itself for days, and learning of the sand dancing on the metallic orange lake somehow confirmed it. Many of the northern vegetable rows have sand in them now. The worst ones were shaded a bright baby blue. On the eastern fields, the worst ones were deep twilight. Inside all of them were sand. Jerry and Marisol organized shifts for us. Some moved in teams collecting any edible food we could find. Some others inspected and disinfected it. The admin claimed they should have been consulted about new job assignments, and we happily offered them places in the shift rotation. The engineers have no idea why or how the sand is in the plants. They know it wasn't the pods. Everything went precisely the same way as every other successful DPC terraform. So, they assure us that it's probably temporary, and the next storm will settle everything back into its natural rhythm. Though, it's already stormed here twice, and each time the rain doesn't seem to dampen the sand at all. The wind merely whips it through the air, stinging our eyes and lodging in our throats. A few of the admin have gotten a cold. We worry about alien diseases, remembering travesties of the past, but engineering tells us that it's just a common cold, nothing to worry over. One admin, Aveen, was caught hoarding food, which was both surprising and not. Some admin began defending him, but they realized quickly that no one else would, and so they stopped. Oveen was forced to give it all back, relieved of any responsibility, and assigned a work supervisor. Few of us took kindly to the theft, even though we're all doing the math, counting the mouths, estimating how long food stores will last. Entry 6. The engineers have concluded that the continued presence of sand could not possibly have been a pod malfunction. The pods did exactly what they were supposed to. All their systems ran through correctly. Still, the sand comes. The darkest shade of blue plants began to turn black. That blue grass, head high, turned black overnight. Andrew called us all to see it first thing one morning. It seemed as dark as space, waving softly in the wind. Then, a section of the black grass, perhaps 20 square feet, just fell. It crumbled, and then there was a pile of sand, fresh and dry as ever. It started miles away, but we could tell it was coming closer. We finally got word from the southern colony. 2 words, in fact, delivered in Morse code via shortwave radio. Moving sands. None of us are sure what it means, especially considering the sand in our food, but the engineers think it confirms their microwind theory, while admin thinks it is some poetry declaring their independence, their isolation. Few of us settlers bought into either theory, but none of us have a better one. After another storm last night with no change, admin told the engineers to get to work on creating desert plants, resigning all of us to a life similar to our Earth ancestors. Food stores are still good, but we worry and set guards. There hasn't been any more theft, probably because everyone realizes that it isn't a winning strategy. Still, we check the guards at the end of their shifts for food stuffed away. A few engineers have caught the cold running around town. Some settlers now, too. It doesn't seem too bad, not compared to everything else going on, but as more and more folk are catching it, there are less and less of us working to figure out solutions. Entry 7. All the black grass is gone, replaced by a desert that's larger every day. We don't walk over there. The sick admin died last night. Their skin turned blue, then black within the hour. After seeing their spit was thick and grainy, we performed a crude autopsy. Inside, it was the same as the plants, sand. We all figure that the sick engineers and settlers are next. We've quarantined them, but many of us are still getting sick regardless. It presents as a cold, until the skin begins to turn, and no one has gotten better. Morale is low, as no one can agree on what to do. We've talked to the engineers about leaving, but they say they need months, years maybe, to even have a shot at getting the ship off the ground. And even if we do, there are issues of supply, hibernation fluid, mostly, and our solar sails were repurposed to power the town. Our fields are all blue. They'll turn black soon enough. Around our homes, the gardens are still green, but none of us have any doubt that they'll change. Entry 8. More sick, more dead. We bury their bodies in the desert as best we can, letting the shifting sand do much of the work. We do it because we should, and because there's nothing else to do with them, but we hate it. We stand on the sand, feeling it give beneath us. Could it grab us? Could it pull us in? It seems cruel to give the bodies to the sand that just killed them, but, again, there's nothing to do with them. The fields are all black or fallen into sand already. Our town is now bruised with blue and black plants. We wait for them to die. Entry 9. An admin who is sick, Enrique, said he wanted a religious burial, and he admitted to smuggling an old physical book, the Bible, along with him. He died by the time we found it stashed in his room. Another admin took the Bible out of its vacuum-sealed bag to say final rites, and as she was reading, the sand seemed to shift and stir, the winds moving it closer and closer to her, to the book. The sands moved like water, forming a small wave. The wind, microwind, we guessed, was strangely hypnotizing. The sand twirled and reformed in patterns just barely unrecognizable. Entry 10. The sand is moving, no wind, not just trickles or tricks of the eye. The sands move in huge swaths across town, more waves but bigger, ankle high, and right through the heart of town. More have died. With no better ideas, we used the Bible again, and again the sand swarmed, moving quicker than we'd seen before. It reared up into a knee-high crest and pushed us over. The book flew to the ground, and the sand swallowed it. We watched as the grains moved against the wind, tracing the patterns of the letters. We watched and saw an intention to the movement, a purpose, for the first time. We, those few of us who remained, all agreed that we felt like we were watching someone without sight read a book. Entry 11. They're all gone now. Even their graves have been swallowed by the sands, and I've taken on a bluish tint, so I went to the Sunset Lake to rest. There, I saw the same ripples again. I watched as the sand moved with a similar purpose, that same definite intention as before. It took me until I saw their message to understand what we'd done. They rippled across the water, repeating a single word in their wake: home. Thank you.
Hello, I have the pleasure of introducing Megan Gower. Megan graduated from Appalachian State University with her BA in English, with concentrations in both creative writing and professional writing. She attended the Columbia Publishing course and worked in New York City publishing industry before deciding to return to her home in North Carolina and pursue her graduate degree. Currently, Megan is working on her MFA in poetry at UNCG Greensboro. Her passions lie not only in verse, but also in children's, middle grade, and young adult literature of every genre. She is the kind of person who works diligently through her life to accomplish goals she sets for herself. She is polished and carries herself with life with the keen eye of an editor. She is incredibly loyal and wise behind her years, but most notably, and perhaps most importantly, Megan is the kind of person who prioritizes joy for herself and for others in her everyday. If you are lucky enough to become her friend, you too will find yourself giddy for all the small milestones in your life, whether that be finding a new author you love, walking around the neighborhood, starting a new relationship, or just coming back to your favorite dessert. She knows that these small moments shared with loved ones are the moments that one later looks back on as the huge moments of things that really mattered. It's this lesson that makes her poetry so captivating. Megan's work often explores the motivation of her relationship with her loved ones, with the natural world, and careful consideration of posthumous authors. She is able to consider these moments that at first glance may seem like small milestones and turn them into images that linger with you long after you've stopped reading her work. With that being said, please help me in welcoming Megan.
Thank you, Brianna, for that lovely introduction. And thank you, Michael, the man behind the camera tonight. And of course, thank you to everybody watching virtually out there in the ethersphere. I have a long list of people to thank for getting me where I am today. First and foremost being the UNCG MFA program, which is full of wonderful mentors who have guided me in this journey. Thank you to Terry Kennedy, the program director, for being the first kind voice that I heard across the telephone 2 years ago, breaking the exciting news that I got in. Thank you, Amelia Phillips and Jennifer Whitaker, for your kindness and honest revisions, and a huge thank you to my thesis chair, Stuart Deschelle. I could listen to you talk for hours about everything poetry, get the inside scoop on some of my favorite poets, and still only scratch the tip of the iceberg of your knowledge and wisdom. And of course, this program wouldn't be what it is without the people suffering along beside me. So thank you to my cohort of fiction and poetry writers. Thank you for reading many drafts of my work and hyping me up all the time. Last but never least, thank you to my family and my close loved ones for supporting me in this admittedly odd endeavor of mine. Thank you to my mother for supporting me in my love of poetry since the very beginning, back when I thought Shel Silverstein and Dr. Seuss were the best poets in the world. Also, sincerest of apologies to my family as well, many of whom I've stolen details of their lives as creative fodder for my own benefit. My bad. This first poem is called To Mary Oliver, because she is one of my favorite poets. I used to dream of pressing night owls, grasshoppers, and wild geese between pages like dried lily petals, keepsakes for later, like the way I savor every letter of your poems, like they could tell me something I don't already know. Except I already own the connection between the green of the mother and the red of my tongue, can taste the heron's cry, and know to never shy from the dirt. Even on carpet, stories above the ground, I feel the snap of the snare stringing me upside down, and the impression I swing into the world. Though I never venture into the woods, I know that ivy is slick, that moss can be crunchy, that even dead trees can live forever, that rings rot but roots dig, that water can be hard and soft and jagged and lacy and slimy and will eat everything. Though I've never heard a bloated tick's heartbeat or smelled the side of a deer, I have lived in 100 different bodies, am tethered to the one-day fly, the fuzzy-bottomed bee, and the lonely, long-beaked stork. I don't have to spend a lifetime perched above water or walking in woods to know I belong with the hummingbirds, carried away by a violent gale, or with the voles digging with little hands into the earth. This next poem is a sestina, dedicated to my sister. For those of you unfamiliar with the structure of a sestina, it is a poem made up of 6 stanzas of 6 lines each, and at the end of each line in the stanza, a word is repeated in different variations. So you will hear 6 words repeated often in this poem: witch, tea, woods, stars, fingers, and white. It's called Spill the Tea. My sister calls herself a modern witch, pours lavender and honey in her tea, is more of a homebody than belongs to the woods, uses an app to read the stars, has silver rings to adorn all her fingers, and box bleach which turns her black hair white. Tonight, the moon outside is whole and white. My sister calls it the night of the witch. She lights candles and incense and fingers an energy crystal necklace, sips her black tea. From her window, I can't see the stars, only thorny branches from the woods. By her altar, hewn from 3 types of woods, we sit on the carpet, which used to be white, but is now coated in cat hair, and which stars burn holes from her cigarettes. The witch lays out the cards, takes a sip of her tea, and lightly touches each one with her fingers. It's at the tip of her tongue, the tip of her fingers. She tries to articulate my life like the woods, pulled by death, by swords. She looks to her tea, to the floating dregs, leaves against the white cup, and utters, "It's so hard being a witch," and draws one last one, the card of stars. I'm not sure what it means, but the stars have never led me wrong. Evening fingers always guide the way. Though I'm no witch, I've never gotten lost in the woods. My sister's face, like wax, shines white, and she stares for a while at the tea. Finally, she decides to spill the tea. She says my immediate future stars no love, no brave and handsome knight in white. Loss will spill through my fingers. Dangerous animals lurk in the woods. I'm lucky to have the protection of a witch. This next one is called Growth. Rosemary browning on the balcony. Even dry things run out of the will to live. Terracotta hot and burning, holding the dead earth. My mother says to plant, and it is good to be around the green, to have your hands stuck in something alive, to be responsible for something other than my baking body. I think she wants grandchildren, but will settle for a vase full of peonies in the center of the dinner table, or the 8-foot-long ivy vine hung by the window, for now. How do I tell her I see the lines on every little leaf, webbing, fingers grasping and clutching and wanting, stretched taut with growth? I rub my hands over my sides to feel, and I worry. I am already covered in growth. I am already pulled tight with lines. Can hardly fit my jeans over. One can grow enough. A full bushel of flowers looks good, growing in the open field, in the chaos of an untamed meadow, or neatly packed in pots and baking on the ledge outside. I do not. I tell my mother, the seeds are placed in dirt. I can place them in dirt, but I am as dry as the rosemary. Wearing. Monday's dress by the mirror, Friday's pressed pants on the standing lamp, every outfit clinging with something that ought to be cleaned. Not dirty, yet somehow heavy and soiled and ripening daily. Every day I pass the same mustard blouse and ripped jeans buried at the foot of my bed, and I feel you pressing me into your mattress, head nuzzled against my chest, beard scratching cotton, and the casual shrug of your shoulders when you said, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say when my roommate asks me why I haven't cleaned my room in a month, why all my clothes are haunting me, why they are taking over, and she asks me, what am I so afraid of? I shouldn't fear dumping them into boiling water and scourging them with bleach and spinning them between blades. Should know that wringing them out and tumbling them dry won't kill anything but the sweat I ached in them. I should want to clean myself of you, should not run out of clothes to wear because they all remind me of that heaviness. It's all an experience I'm afraid of losing, and they wear it with me. The fall. She lived in a single room with 2 cats and 20 strays that played in the lot out back. She left dishes sitting on side tables, the windowsill, the patio, where food chilled and rotted and reheated and rotted more by morning. Teacups stacked in the sink, water stale and filmed over with oil, smelling of old lavender and bitter lemon. She left spills she'd never clean up, sticky spots that glued her heels to the floor, candle wax on the wood of her altar, hardening like her, like the food, like the trees as the air cooled. She laid in bed, covered in dander, fan blowing dust and dead air, the weak sunlight rinsing the door. She hated the fall, She hated the fall, the way it fell into her lap every year, black cat. She had to survive the bad luck that stirred in her gut. As defense, she crawled into quilts, wore them on her back heavy shawls that weighed her down, brought her closer to God. The bushes cradled 100 cigarette butts, burnt orange like the leaves, turning while she watched and puffed, the shadows shifting, and she listened to the slow haul of winter's hands as it grabbed her up and shook her. She would rather burn on a pyre like her ancestors, would rather roast marshmallows on the hot, steaming pavement or the dashboard of her car. Wish she had a hollow fireplace she could step into. Thought being knee-deep in ashes is better than being neck-deep in the woods. Sunday morning, hate breaking with bread and grape juice. Young ladies stuffed into dresses and falling asleep on the hard wooden pews, designed for repenting bottoms, designed to keep us awake. At 7, they asked me, "Do you believe in God?" At 7, the pool at the back of a secret room above the pulpit looked like a blue lagoon. At 7, I would have said anything to take a dip in my clothes, have the eyes of all the adults observe the forgiving my unbudded body needed, to receive congratulation gifts and money to spend at the toy store. I could buy baby dolls and practice being a mother, a wife, being saved by a man. Jesus was a hot, white, bearded sacrifice I had a crush on, sometimes a father like mine who couldn't take care of his children, a man who taught me not to curse, a man, not a woman, who taught me how to share. Sinner, I'd rather slither between the congregation's feet, would beg to color the back of the offering card, thought long and hard about sticking sweaty hands into the red velvet bag, sucking on my fingers, and not giving a holy fuck. This is my final piece of the night. Thank you again to everybody tuning in to listen. Moon gazing. We're going to look at the moon, he says. It's full and you can see the face she is making, always grimacing at the earth with her one black eye. We are 3,300 feet above sea level and squinting through high-powered telescopes so close we can see the craters and empty basins dimpling her cheeks. It's wild to think. She glows without emitting her own light. We are observing, he says. We must always be watching, gathering data. How close can you look? We are all 18 and shrinking from the magnitude of the world we are walking into. And I think, we are not blind. Even without the glass stuck against our eyes, we can see that it is now snowing in October, the first one in over 100 years, that the trees took time to age this year, that they turned from brilliant green to brown to barren, and we missed the change. We know what Earth looks like, why the moon scowls, eyeing the wild eyes in the Atlantic, acknowledging the receding hairline of the Arctic. He says, "Notice how it ascends, looming above the mountains. Do you see?" We do. We see it looming. It doesn't take a genius to look at the silver lump of weightless hanging rock and know how centrifugal force can capture debris, celestial trash, how the fast spinning, the uncontrollability, the gravity can make us hold onto heavy, dead things. Our breath fogs in the air, fogs the lens, but we don't need it to see. We gaze at the face of the moon, and we are afraid. Thank you.
I'm back. But this time, it is my great pleasure to introduce our third and final reader of the evening, Chris Swenson. Chris is from the radioactive mountains and valleys of southern Idaho, and he is the current fiction editor for the Greensboro Review. He wrote that. I'm here to say that Chris is paying more close attention to this world than many of the writers that I've met, which is saying something since it's sort of our job to pay attention. I would be remiss that if I didn't mention that in workshop, Chris often gives a massive, magnificent nod of his head. Really, it's kind of his whole body. And when asked if he has something to add, he'll offer a simple, no. Sometimes though, instead of no, he'll say, well, yeah, I mean, the story is really about X. Thus summarizing not only what the story is and could be, but what the writer invariably wanted it to become. This he can see through the messiness of first drafts, and it's something I was always looking forward to in workshop, even when it wasn't my story being talked about. I bring this up only because it shows the calm confidence that Chris possesses. He is here to write, not prove that he can write. He is here to further his craft, not prove that he is putting in the work. And he does put in the work. You'll see that tonight for yourself. But Chris is also a prolific reader, both the obscure stuff you've never heard of and those canonical authors who, if we're being honest, you've never read. Chris has. Chris is a multifaceted writer, and while it's true that Chris's thesis largely centers around one geographic place, as he put it, a was and a used to be kind of town, he also writes from varying perspectives within that place, giving us stories that see it anew each time. These varied characters have all, by the time we met them, experienced whole worlds of loss within this one small town. And Chris writes so that these pasts continuously haunt the present in new ways. But he will surprise you. Suddenly, he appears with a Kafkaesque story about the dating community of insect people. You think his stories will be set in those radioactive hills of Idaho when he places you squarely in the old country's forests, replete with monstrous wolves that know you by name. Or suddenly, you're in a 1930s northeastern town, next to a beached whale, following a young girl as she reckons with her recently deceased abusive father's legacy. Chris's writing will leave you feeling trapped right alongside his characters, who always have just enough space to know that they should escape. Perhaps, maybe, just barely enough space to escape, and that's the place that Chris writes from. Chris will leave you yearning for more, because his writing, like all the best writing, contains stories within stories. I'm still wondering about 3 black miracles that defrocked a narrator in both body and spirit. His writing will take you to those radioactive fields of southern Idaho, filled with sad little creatures that I won't name, and far beyond, to places only Chris can imagine. And there isn't the slightest doubt in my mind, we'll all be reading his work and following him to fantastic places for years to come. Please welcome our final reader of the evening, Chris Swenson.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you for that very generous introduction. And also, I just wanted to say a thanks, of course, to the program, Terry and Jesse, for making it an extremely welcoming place. And also, thank you to just everyone I've worked with on the faculty, Janet, Holly, Derek. I've learned a lot. And in this particular case, I've learned that sometimes revision is more cutting than addition, like a sort of literary topiary. And so I just thought I'd get right into it. And also a special thanks to, of course, Michael, who, if he wasn't technically adept, we would be totally screwed. So that worked out, thank you. So I thought I would just get right into it, but again, just thank you for this opportunity, everyone. Oh yeah, and I should say this is a story that I've been working on for a very long time, and again, like I said, I've been learning, especially from, on this particular story, I've been working with the wonderful Janet Alou, and as I said, I've learned that revision is sometimes more about cutting than addition, even though those cuts are very painful, but necessary. So this is a story based on the only interesting thing that ever really happened in the place I come from. I'm referring to an incident called Liger Town, in which a roadside zoo filled with ligers, and I've said this many times, yes, they are real, escaped and just ran wild in the hills for a week straight, and there's just something very magical realist about that I find very inspiring, especially because they're creatures that really should not exist. So this is a story called Free Drinks for the Liger Man. My father needed me to do the shooting. His hands were both too stiff and too shaky for the job. Useless. After I helped him dress, we headed out early morning. The blue hour, dawn poured like an oil slick. We were accustomed to late-night jacklighting in the hills. But today was different. Today was legal. My father always needed to hunt more. In the past, he would take me, little Eric, to show me the right way to shoot game, the place where heart and lung meet. Smacked and pulled hard by the arm in the dark are formative memories of the rage and disappointment when shots were missed, while game is mesmerized in halos of LED light. I'm grown now, and my father needed me to hunt. His sad insistence to be lost in the hills instead of in his bottles, it was like a junkie hustling for a fix. Most years, it was poaching. A jacklight tag in the long nights of winter. This time he had an honest-to-God tag bought with scratch ticket money. He needed me to do the shooting. I drove us in the old pickup through the hills. Nothing for miles but abandoned ranches, too close to the phosphate hills and plant. The vacant stinker station, empty and frozen in time. Past the old Woney Peters place, rough-hewn cages of rusted iron for a long-ago roadside zoo. Liger Town, announces the painted sign. Happy memories there for me and my sister, taken by our mother to see the rare ligers pacing desperate and wild in the dry summer heat. Those were the days before the Great Escape, when the Idaho hills were filled with ligers and hybrid wolves. We'd watch them on TV as the local authorities hunted them down, one by one, and our father had hooted because he had thought they must be having the time of their lives. I pulled us off the paved road and into the hills. We said nothing. Out here, the truck's antenna picks up no radio. There was only the occasional chorus of tires on cattle grates. I found a place to park us. He carried the rifle, even though we both knew he wouldn't be shooting, and I carried an old tarp. Now retired, my old man could barely walk. His face always seemed stiff. his jaw clenched like he's passing a peach pit. It was the years working in the plant pouring the phosphate slag on the hillside. He'd helped make a dozen or more of the Black Hills, seen from anywhere in Walker Springs. There was a time he would take me to watch the phosphate slag be poured. Nauseating smell, like 1,000 matchsticks struck at once. Hissing hills that grew with each pour. He told me, "This stuff is used for everything. The roads, our basements. These man-made mountains of slag will be here for 100 years, just like regular hills." The radiation of that place, you could feel it moving through you. For years, he poured something into the land, and something was poured into him. He could have sued, but then no one can really sue. Not the company, not in Walker Springs. He was a company man, so he had told me many times. A company man, a man of integrity. We stalked along the border of BLM land. The years of jacklighting the hills had made us experts on the elk and their trails near here or the res. The night before, we had heard a bull bugling his cows along the way. Today, as we tracked him, it was me that was slowing us down. My mind elsewhere. "Your legs painted on? Get," he jeered at me, mouth taut with chew. If things were better, I could have left him to hunt for his own damn self. But we lived together, and he could not live on his retirement alone, so we barely get by together. So we poached together. As we crested a hill overlooking a watering hole, we saw it. At first, it had looked like a mountain lion. No, much too big for that. It walked with a almost wounded but steady gait, almost as big as a horse. I took the rifle and peered at it through the scope. Its fur was a mottled gold and brown in the rising sun, patchy and missing in places. Its mouth, my God, its large mouth, foaming and hung open. The eyes were wide, a look on its face like permanent surprise, like it had trouble taking it all in. It stopped for a moment, resting to drink from a pond, its tongue lapping up water from its paws. It was sickly, but strong, this strange miracle in the mountains. "God damn, it's one of those ligers," my old man sputtered. There were rumors one might still be alive after the incident. There were at least a couple unaccounted for years somehow. I could hardly believe one could survive in Idaho so long. I watched for a long time through my scope as it put its nose to the wind. It began to walk through the valley of sage, head hung low. "God damn it! Shoot it, boy." I knew he was thinking of the bounty, by both the company and the county. I wanted to watch it. "God damn it, fucking shoot it." He gripped my shoulder tight. I pulled the trigger. We were in the Walker times. The liger splayed on the earth, its tongue hanging from its mouth, us over it smiling. We received the bounty of a few $1,000s. The next day, my old man had disappeared with a chunk of money I'd given him. I knew he'd be spending it at the scratch ticket machine in town. I knew he'd be thanking God Almighty for those large buttons. I was headed to town to get lit with the boys, to celebrate my newfound celebrity as the killer of the last Idaho liger. As I drove to Walker Springs, I thought about if I'd let it go. The thought of it being out there in the hills. That's what I wanted. I drove past the Black Rock Hills. I drove past the Black Rock Hills. Mikey, Brandon, and I combed as kids with our 22s. Rock chucks, magpies, the McPherson cats. All game for boys with time on their hands. Walker Springs, around the bend. I drove along the river that cuts through our small town and draws in tourists to nature hike or float the river currents. As boys, we had told the visiting yuppies that old crazy man Henderson loved to catch rattlesnakes and liberate them of their tails with a serrated marine K-bar before setting them loose again. That got the out-of-towners walking real careful in their Birkenstocks. Good times. Now past the hidden hot springs that feed the river, and only give themselves up to strangers in the winter with their hot breath. The one by the bridge next to the old inn, secreted away in springtime, a place for first kisses. Annabelle. I'd not talked to her in a while. She used to send me postcards from places she's never been, each one marked up with lipstick kisses and red letter messages. This could be us. Would love to go with you. Don't be a stranger. Hugs and kisses. Last time I saw her, I'd walked to the house unannounced. There was a strange truck parked there. Was it for her or one of her roommates? When I walked in, a strange man was talking to Annabelle. He wore the overalls of the company. He smelled like matches. I grabbed a wine bottle off the kitchen table and smashed it over his head. Annabelle tried to tell me he was just a cousin as he lay there confused. But I just shouted at him. Not really words, just an awful sound. I thought for a moment to get her a postcard for our town, to stop at Sam's General Store, to grab one with one of the infamous ligers peering from a rack of tacky sunglasses and psychedelic lighters. You're never gonna believe this, it might say. I kept driving. As I pulled up to the Oasis bar, I could see my old man at a bench, scratching his lotto tickets, holding a quarter tightly in his knuckles, spittles at the corners of his mouth. I did not know whether to feel sorry for him or beat his ass. He had not seen me. I just walked into the bar. When I entered, the bartender hit a cattle bell. There he is, the hometown hero. Tonight, free drinks for Liger Man. Everyone applauded. People asked to get their picture with me. They asked me, what was it like? I don't know what it was like. Nothing, really. Were you scared? Not really. What were you thinking when you saw it? I don't know. I headed to the table to meet the boys. Well, 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 look who it is. Mikey tightly gripped my shoulder. The Liger Killer, hometown hero. I can't believe you got it in one shot, man, Brandon said as he scooted a beer glass in my direction. That's some badass shit. Just lucky, I guess, I said as I took a big sip. The manliest shit you could possibly do is kill lions, Brandon explained. Or maybe an elephant, or a rhino. Well then, that settles it. To our bro who is finally a real man. For the most part, Mikey said as he raised a glass with his good hand. He was still giving me shit for not serving, even now. But I was used to it. When the three of us had barely graduated high school, we all vowed to join the army. I could not pass the physical examination. Heart defect. A gift from the company hill. My inheritance. I told the boys I had to stay. Had to take care of the old man. They almost believed me. I could have got a job at the company. Instead, I spent years doing odd jobs. There's always demand in Walker Springs for maintenance, fixing windows, painting and drywall, whatever. When they got back from over there, Mikey was more inclined to drink and find excuses to fight strangers at bars, mostly yuppies or hipsters. His prosthetic hook, he refused to talk about, except to sarcastically make pirate noises. Brandon never talked about what happened, but now he blinked hard, like it took twice the effort. When Mikey got to laying into me, Brandon always came in with some snide remark, like he was trying to even the score. He bumped his elbow against Mikey's prosthetic. Hey, what's a pirate's favorite letter? You think it's the C, but it's the R. Brandon laughed as he lit a cigarette. Mikey suddenly pointed at the door. Look who it is, the handless man. The handless man was someone who would sometimes appear in the bar or on the street. We never really spoke to him, but in this moment we watched him talk to a pair of out-of-town girls as he held his drink to his chest, his arms crossed. Maybe he lost them serving. Don't be dicks, guys, I said. No way. Nubs are too smooth. And besides, according to my girl, he's lived here forever. And he's always been like that, Mikey said, pointing with the cigarette in his good hand for emphasis. Oh shit, he's a phosphate baby or some shit then, right? Brandon said as he was pouring himself a new glass from the pitcher. I'm surprised we don't got more of them, you know? You would know all about that, wouldn't you, Eric? Mikey bumped my arm with his. Your old man still as shaky as a dog pissing razor blades? I wonder how he puts on and takes off his pants, Brandon said as he laughed, posing the question in the handless man's direction. Easy. Velcro fly, easy to pull apart, or some other kind of special thing. But I wonder why he never wears prosthetics. The plot deepens, Mikey said as he took a long drag. I know how, I said. He wears suspenders, and when he needs to, he slips out of them, and he puts the nubs in his pockets and shoves. Bullshit, Mikey laughed. But I'd pay good money to see that. We should ask him. Can't. Once I almost beat the handless man's ass, Brandon said, draining a glass. We both looked at him in amazement. I didn't actually fight him, but I wanted to. He gave me shit because I was talking to this out-of-town girl, and he told me to be more respectful, and I about decked him right there. I had to walk away from that shit. Mikey laughed. Good thing you didn't fight a man with no hands. I mean, motherfucker doesn't even wear hooks, for God's sakes. You beat him, and congratulations. You just beat up a cripple. He beats you, and you look like a bitch. It's a real conundrum. Hey, Liger Man, nice job, the handless man called in my direction. Some drinks were sent our way. Mikey and Brandon made dismissive remarks as they watched the handless man wave at us, then dance and flirt with the nearest girls, swaying his hips to the jukebox music, trying to make seductive faces on a smoky dance floor. Mikey drained his glass and gave a long sigh. Fuck this place. I can't watch this shameful display. Let's go to the wagon wheel. I would have protested, but we were already through the door. A full night of drinking. Mikey was boasting about his plans to go back to the Oasis and fight the first man in sensible shoes. We marched under the buzzing canopy of bar signs and streetlights. Mikey and Brandon were singing half-remembered lyrics from the radio, catcalling out-of-town girls who laughed among themselves and gave us the finger. In the distance, I saw my father in the lime-green glow of the scratch ticket machine, still scratching. I slipped away, mumbling something about cigarettes and taking a piss. Mikey and Brandon stumbled towards the distant thrum of a sloppy cover band, the shouting of women. I slipped away into the dark pathways that followed the river. The cool air felt good on my aching head. I lit a cigarette and leaned against the light pole. I found the coolness of the metal comforting on my head. I leaned into it and watched the pale insects swarm around the air, around the light, while I made a futile effort to blow smoke at them. Liger killer, what's up? A voice from the dark. The handless man was walking his way from town. He was red-faced and swaying loosely with each step. Liger, 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 man, just hanging in there. Don't party too hard, he laughed. Whatever, man, fuck off, I mumbled, cigarette in my mouth. The buzzing of the lamp began to irritate me. Fucking whatever, hands man. The handless man continued up the path, till he's only barely visible. He then stopped and turned towards the river. Damn, Liger man, I gotta piss like a mule. I just made a jerk-off motion towards him with my hands. Whatever, man. But then I curiously peered sideways. The handless man was whistling as he took his nubs and deftly shoved them into his pockets. He pulled his pants all the way down to his ankles and rose with a sigh of relief as he pissed towards the river. I laughed quietly to myself, dropping my cigarette from my mouth and burning my arm. God damn it. Careful, Liger man, shit will kill you, the handless man laughed. He began to sing loudly into the cool air, his voice cracking in the cold. In the jungle, the mighty jungle, the liger sleeps tonight. He kept singing, his nubs on his swinging hips. He sang like a crooner to the river, and I felt the buzzing in my head rise. Hey, shut the fuck up. The handless man only grew louder. Ah-wee-wah. I rushed the handless man, hitting him in the back of the head with my fists. The handless man raised his arms in a sad attempt to protect himself. His piss sprang in every direction. He tripped over his own pants, swearing. As he tried to rise, I kicked him down towards the river, a tangle of limbs lassoed in Levi's, tumbling into the dark. He disappeared over the edge. I heard rustling of bushes, rocks tumbling, the splash of water. I looked to the river and could make out the handless man wading to the shore, a sad waddle up the muddy riverbed, his pale legs still exposed, wet denim clinging to his legs. Fuck you, Liger man, what the fuck? The handless man reached the shore and looked up at me. Fuck you forever, Liger man, you dick. He struggled to pull up his pants with the same deftness that removed them. The handless man began walking along the river away from town. I suddenly wanted to leap into the river and help him out. I wanted to call out, offer him a ride, apologize. I wanted to say I was sorry that I put him in the river. Sorry that it had been funny he was born this way. Sorry that he was probably just another sad phosphate baby. Sorry that just looking at him and hearing him had made me sick, had made me want to throw him into the water and hold him there. I just stood there. Soon the handless man was too far away to be seen or heard. I went down to the river's edge and sat on a rock, my face in my hands. I cried out into the dark. Not really words, just a sound. Thank you.